There's a big difference between becoming known and becoming respected. Don't let an algorithm convince you otherwise.
I mean, I think this is probably super pertinent for people in our position, but I'll go from the internet perspective and we can circle back to IRL. But I mean, a lot of people will make content. So obviously I make stuff for me too. Like talk about artists making things for themselves. Like I make most of my tweets are just like notes to self. But like if I ever feel like I have to sacrifice who I am or the values that I believe in order to like get more views or something like that, I see it happen more times than not because the algorithm and the views and the likes become kind of a proxy for conforming in their own way. Like everyone likes this type of thing. Do more of that. And that makes me feel very like dance monkey dance. And I think there's few things that kill my soul more than that. And so I would rather the algorithm shut me off tomorrow and I continue to make stuff that I find interesting, that 10 people find interesting, that is actually the same stuff as me, than just have these viral hits that I feel like I'm Ronald McDonald in and just feel like I've completely lost my soul. And I do think, as a side note, that if you do the first one where your intention is to maybe help find the 10 people who are really interested in your thing, you probably will create more of the viral hits. But when you solve for the other way, I think you accomplish neither.
I have this theory that more creators fall out of favor because they become cringe than because they become irrelevant.
I love that. I love that.
There are tons and tons and tons of people on the planet who have huge platforms that nobody respects. And I've seen, even within my 7-year career of doing this, the arc of people trade integrity for exposure and not be able to buy it back.
Yeah.
Because there is no return policy on your integrity.
On your reputation.
And those people would give anything to be back in the cool kids club.
I mean, this is I love this entire train. I was thinking like, what creates, like, what's timelessly not cringe, right? Like, so like if cringe is the ultimate, like what we don't want, then like what is forever not cringe? And the only thing that I can like really think of is just true authenticity, which is an overused word, but again, easy to say, hard to do. I think what is forever cringe on the equal opposite side is pandering. Like whenever you're seen as someone who's only doing stuff for other people's opinion, approval, likes, whatever, especially double cringe when it's for your own personal gain. And so if the equal opposite of that is something that is to my personal detriment, that is truly something that I believe in, it honestly doesn't matter what it is. Because there are some people that probably believe things that I don't believe, but I genuinely think, based on what I see, that they genuinely believe it, and they don't really stand to gain much for believing it. There's no cringe there. It's just like that man fucking believes that. And I think that some of the characters in our current, politosphere and things like that, like many people, you say the word Trump and you have half the people who hate you and the other half that love you. It's like, I think most people agree that he believes what he says. Now, whether you believe the content of what he's saying is a different story, but I don't think many people have called him as somebody who's like, I think he doesn't really think that about himself. Like, no, I think he really does. And even I'm just gonna push the edges because that's where you have to like explore the fringe. Look at someone like Kanye, who's been borderline canceled for, multiple times, right? But like, why is Kanye quote uncancelable? Because he hasn't been, right? Not really. Like if he came out tomorrow with a hit album, I'll bet you it would fucking sell. Because I think that, at least for me, from what I see, I think he does what he believes. And people might be like, he's mentally unstable. There's all these other things, but like, no one thinks he's being fake. And I think that like, if that becomes the North Star of like, I just never want to become cringe, then it's just never be fake.
Avoiding cringe and aligning authenticity as best you can, and it's a permanent battle because you are not inside of a vacuum and you see other people doing things and there is temptation and you need to respond to the audience's feedback in some regard, or else you're just going to be making something that nobody fucking cares about, but you also need to not compromise too much. One of your old ones related to this: people are attracted to authenticity, but it's hard to define for me. Here's my best attempt. True alignment of what you think, what you say, and what you do. The hardest part is realizing that our thoughts are fucked and that we have to fix them instead of faking the next two.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Many people would rather be hated than unknown. In ancient Greece, Herostratus burned down the temple of Artemis purely so that he would be remembered. Nowadays, we have nuisance influencers who stream themselves committing crimes and harassing people purely for clout. Herostratic fame.
Yeah, that's like you gain the world but you lose your soul. kind of. I mean, I'm also the last person to judge. And so, like, if that's what you want, then by all means do
I don't
it.
think it's what people want. I think that they think it's what they want. I've been playing with this idea, or this name, one of the concepts that the book will be focused on, intentionalism and essentialism by Greg McEwen's one of my favorite ever books. Doing what you mean to do and wanting what you want to want is so fucking hard to do and so rare because we're built to conform.
I think one of my life goals, and I can summarize it in a question, but is to be fearless. And it's, I mean, equal opposite courage is another word. But I love this question, which is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I love thinking about that when I'm thinking about big life decisions. Like, what would I do if I weren't afraid? And it's usually like the big one, the bigger thing that I really want to do, but I'm afraid to do it. It's like, that's what I should do. And to your point about, you had the 5 things that you told your team. The one that we have is, originally it was something that we called 1 of 1, which is make only things that we can make. Like, you'll never see a Coca-Cola business breakdown from Alex Hormozi because anyone can do a Coca-Cola business breakdown. That's not 1 of 1 content. But if I say, I doubled the sales of this company by implementing these 4 things, no one else can say that because no one else did it, right? And so it's 1 of 1. And so as the book launch and whatnot came, we took 1 of 1 and it became this big, massive thing. And it stopped being about like, what can only do things that only we can do. It was about doing things that we didn't even know we could do yet, which became 1 of 0. And that's why that became the brand that I'm going to continue to wear for the next few years and build that association. But I think that kind of encapsulates my personal life goal, which is like, what would I do if I weren't afraid? And what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And the idea that I will never wish for fewer epic stories at the end of my life. And I've never regretted failures. I've always regretted things that I didn't try. And so just along those lines of trying to create more bias internally towards action rather than inaction, and normalizing consequences of failure as we said earlier, win or learn. And I think that little frame, believe it or not, for anyone who's like on the teetering edge of like, what should I do that thing? When I was debating quitting my job, which is still the hardest decision I've made to this day, still of the many that I've made, was I figured that if I didn't make the entrepreneurship thing work, I would have a hell of a story for business school. And that was actually like the reasoned argument that I gave myself for being willing to quit, was that I think that with my experience, I'll still be able to get a job and I'll have a really cool story of entrepreneurship that I could use to apply to get into business school and then eventually get a job later. And so most times we catastrophize any failure to death, right? Which is like, I'm gonna fail, I'm gonna lose all my money, I'm gonna be homeless, no one's gonna talk to me, I'm gonna die, right? But like, if you play it out 2 natural steps, like, okay, I lose everything, what do I do? I would probably have a couch or floor that someone would lend me, because at least socially, I haven't fucked everyone I know. And so I have that. It's like, okay, so I would have some capacity to do that. Okay, is there anything that I could do in the meantime in order to make money? Well, sure, I could drive Uber and strip. And I've already, I've told this story before, but for me, that was genuinely my plan B, because I knew that I could probably make 70, 80 grand a year driving Uber. I could probably make 150 stripping, maybe 200. Strip at the gay bars, the guys pay better. And then boom, I've got 280,000 a year. I could live on the floor and then I could restart again. And so that's because I don't have a lot of shame with that kind of stuff. That's not like, that doesn't matter to me. But I think playing out the fear, Layla says this and I love it, but that fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And so it looks like this ocean that you're going to step into and drown. But as soon as you step into it, you realize it was not that deep at all and you can keep walking through it. And I just love that visual, because a lot of times when it's like we have this anxiety around this big decision we have to make, if you actually take the step and realize that it's not death, you're not going to drown immediately. There's plenty of other steps you can take from there, even if you get a little wet.
I went for dinner quite a while ago now with this guy that I was pretty interested in, and he knew what I did, and we sort of bumped into each other and, what are you doing? Let's go for dinner. And I knew about the situation that he'd been through, but he didn't know that I knew. So I was like, tell me, like, there's no pressure, and he was able to be unencumbered. And basically he went through like a tough cancellation where kind of the whole world came down to bear on him. And he was telling me this story. I was in a very interesting time. I was like being very reflective. And he said, my whole life I'd been worried that I was a coward. I was terrified that I was a coward. But I'd never been through a situation where I'd had to bring absolutely everything to bear on my life. And I'm a hard man, and I like to hang around with hard men, and I like to shoot guns and do jiu-jitsu and be around Navy SEALs and stuff like that. But I always had this fear in the back of my mind that I might secretly be a coward. And then he said the cancellation thing happened, and it wasn't a very difficult 1-rep max. It wasn't a really hard CrossFit workout. It was something outside of his control. And he used this term that I love, and he said, I could always hear my better self clearing his throat in the room next door. And I always wondered what would happen if I had to really, really wrangle everything, if the whole world came crashing down on me. And I wanted to work out whether or not I was a coward. And he said, thankfully, he kicked the door in and came through.